is there blood on your face? I should have known better. Moving on. Tonight's discussion is on Village of the Damned. So in both versions of Village of the Damned, there's this small town called Midwich in which um, one day all of the locals mysteriously fall unconscious, and then right after they wake up, it turns out that all of the women in this town who are capable of bearing children are pregnant, and then just a few months later, like short of 9 months, they have these children which are, physically perfect specimens, but just a little off in some ways, and as they rapidly grow up, it turns out that there's something very abnormal and sinister about them. So to start off with, each film has its own pro and con when it comes to what takes place after the people of Midwich fall unconscious. In the original, they show a lot more of the process of how some people outside the town are kind of trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this massive unconsciousness. But at the same time, they don't really show as many consequences of these people suddenly falling asleep. The most someone gets is like a bump on the forehead. In the remake, they don't go as much in depth into that exploration of what's going on, but they do show some more violently realistic outcomes of, the unconsciousness. In real life, there are a million things you could be doing in which falling out would be potentially deadly. You could be throwing wood on a fire, you could be driving your car towards a sharp curve in the road. You could be working on a construction site and standing on a steel girder 3 stories up. None of those exact things happen in the remake of Village of the Damned, but again, there are some deadly outcomes. Now then, getting into some of the characters that these films have in common, which I say that because the remake feels like it has a much larger cast. But first of all, there's a love interest for the lead male in both films, and in the original, she has more screen time. You get a better sense of how sweet she is and also how intelligent she is. I love the scene where she first tells her husband that she's pregnant, and in the remake, she has considerably less screen time, and the way that she, reveals her pregnancy is a lot more straightforward, but still not a terrible character. Also, there's this government official in both films. One of the first characters to pop up on the scene after Midwich falls unconscious, and in both films, this character offers a lot of exposition. There's not really much that I can say about the one in the original, other than the fact that he's a little more likable. In the remake, this is a female character played by Kirstie Alley, and she's just a little bit more shady in what she's doing. Now then, getting into the male lead, this is a character who starts off as a doctor, and then eventually becomes a teacher for these children of the damned. Um, in the original, this character exudes much more intelligence and charm, although this could be related to the fact that he's a British character, and he's also actually pretty funny in some scenes. In the remake, the remake takes place in America, so of course he's an American character. He doesn't show as much of the intelligence as the original, but he is a lot more emotional, and he has much more of an attitude when it comes to what's going on in the film. Now then, getting into the villains of Village of the Damned, these children, there is actually a lot to compare when it comes to them. First off, there are some special effects utilized in both films when it comes to this glowing eye effect the children have when they're controlling people's minds, and neither film has aged well in that respect. In the original, it looks fine at first, but then there are a couple of moments where the glowing eyes that they add to the picture fall a little off-center with their irises. And then in the remake, it doesn't get much better as they use some very cartoony-looking CGI effects. Also, when it comes to their victims in each movie, for the original film, it felt like more of the people they killed were innocent, whereas in the remake, there's almost a twisted sense of justice to it because it's more of a product of people acting stupid. Like there's one innocent victim in the remake that I can think of, and then when it comes to the stupid ones, one particular victim who comes to mind is this doctor, and I don't care how bad these children are, the doctor seriously deserved what happened to her. And then the biggest difference is the way that the children act in each movie. In the original film, they showed no real signs of emotion ever. They were very creepily polite, and they never felt any pain, never even showed signs of it. Whereas in the remake, they do weirdly show some signs of feelings, like there's a little girl who's kind of the leader of the group, and in a couple of scenes where she's doing something devious, she cracks a little smirk. And then there's a little boy in the group who is supposed to come off as a more sympathetic character later in the film. I don't know, that just didn't really do anything for me. And they do show signs of showing pain as well, like there's that scene with the doctor that I mentioned where one of them actually starts screaming and crying in pain. Also, something that I almost forgot to mention when it comes to the more sympathetic child in the remake is that he has this odd way of speaking where he's just very slow and monotone. And it would have been fine if the rest of the children had spoken the same way, but they don't. They kind of speak with more inflection, so it doesn't come off as a lack of emotion on the character's part as it does just bad acting. And then one more small comparison I'd like to make before I reach my conclusion in this video is that the origin of the children was a lot more ambiguous in the original. You didn't know exactly what they were or where they came from. For all the audience knew, they could have literally been children of the damned. But in the remake, they go for a more sci-fi approach, and they're a little more obvious about what these children are. So, in the end, I remember quite a few dissing the remake of Village of the Damned, and before tonight, it had been a few years since I last watched the movie, and upon revisiting it, I can kind of see why it's not a very popular remake. In fact, just because the villains fall so flat in it, I'm thinking about going ahead and selling my copy to Half Price Books. The original is definitely a superior film, again, because this horror movie is every bit as good as its villains, which are much more terrifying in the original. And despite the fact that you don't get quite as many characters in it, this does give you a little more time to get invested in the few characters it has. And it's also a very quick watch at just under 80 minutes, so there's really no reason for you not to sit down and watch it unless you don't like black and white movies. But as long as you can get over the lack of color, it does come highly recommended. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for this comparison. I hope you all have a good one. And if you ever find yourself mysteriously with child after waking from an unconscious sleep, consider